Good evening. Tonight we've got jobs for the young, jobs for the old, and we can help you to live to 120 if you want to. But first, here's Ted with the detail of the rundown.
Tonight on Webster, what tastes terrible but can improve your skin, joints, sexual performance, and overall health? Cod liver oil. Coming up, Webster speaks with the Cod Father, Dale Alexander, author and self-educated nutritionist. If you've retired from the business world but not from life, there might be a place for you with C.E.S.O. For the past 20 years, the Canadian Executive Service Organization has been placing retired volunteers where they're needed most. Later with Webster, Robert Dale, chairman of the board for C.E.S.O, and Peter Rogers, a C.E.S.O volunteer. But first, what hope do young Canadians have of finding employment these days, even with an education? And what's the federal government doing to help young Canadians prepare themselves for the working world? In the studio with Webster, Jean Charest, Federal Minister of State for Youth.
And, said Webster, if you're an unskilled youngster, one of the 27 out of every 100 unemployed between the ages of 15 and 24, you haven't got much of a hope at the moment. Every government promises us the kingdom of heaven on earth. And here is a man who is also going to promise the kingdom of heaven on earth. He is Jean Charest, Minister of State for Youth. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Tell me, how long have you been in the Conservative Party?
Oh, I'm one of the youngest Conservatives in the province of Quebec ever since I've been 16 years old, I believe.
And you are how old now?
28 years old.
Said he with proper respect. Well, how do you feel, pristine in your political career, being allied with a government which has been shaken by scandals and destroyed in the polls?
Well, it's not an unusual position to be down in the polls for a progressive Conservative in Quebec. What we are seeing now, I think, is a complete change of the political landscape. The rise of the NDP, the fact that the Liberals are obviously leveling off. It's one thing for us to be down in the polls, and I guess that's a bit normal at mid-mandate if you're the one who carries the brunt and responsibility for everything that's going on in every decision. But for the Liberals to start to be squeezed out, it was quite a new phenomenon.
Matter of fact, the new tactic of the NDP and its new attitude towards Quebec, you know, the uniqueness of Quebec, the right to separate if they wish, that will really hit at some of your weak support in Quebec, won't it?
Well, they're attempting to seduce the nationalist vote that has traditionally been with us, and as long as there's been a tradition for it. But it'll be interesting to see how successful they are. They're also against free trade, for example, something that's very much in the interest of Quebec and other things.
And they have certain economic policies which probably won't go down very well. But we must give you a chance to say what little you're going to do for unemployment. As I gather, Jean Charest, the only practical program you have right now is the usual handouts to members of parliaments of some $180 million to create kind of time-filling jobs at minimum wage. Is that correct?
Well, it's what we have is a summer student program called Challenge 87, which applies to students more specifically. And it's a program that permits to create jobs for young people, either the private or non-profit sector all over Canada, and which in British Columbia next summer will profit to the tune of $19.10 million. $20
million bucks, we'll say.
Yeah.
Now, this is the student summer employment program.
Right.
And so therefore, any employer, or who gets the $180 million?
Well, the $180 million is divided into different components. $127 million of that goes to what we call the SEED program, which is wage subsidy to either the private sector or nonprofit sector. $8 million goes into a program called WOW, for example. That's work orientation workshops for potential school dropouts. Another amount goes to the supernumerary constable program of the RCMP. Another $5.6 million, I believe, will go to federal departments to employ young people, and so on. But the important thing to remember is that the biggest chunk will go to wage subsidies.
That's right, and most of it will go to non-profit organizations.
2/3 of the amount last summer.
So I'm the MP.
Right.
Regardless of my political complexion, do I get the proper ratio? Or, for instance, does Carney control all of the $20 million in British Columbia?
Well, the way it's divided is according to regional allocations. A sum of money is determined according to the regional allocations in Canada. It's one of the only programs that is regionally sensitive. We allocate the money according to the unemployment rate for returning students per region, which means that BC will get more money this year than Ontario. Then sub-regionally it's divided according to the unemployment rate.
How do I get the job, though? I'm a student coming out of school at the end of the year. How do I know about these jobs? A non-profit organization will have its own coterie of friends to hire, will it not?
Yes, and that very naturally, a coterie of friends is one way of putting it, but they'll want to employ, in most cases, as any other employer in any other sector, people they know. The place to go is at the Canadian Employment Centres for Students. Sign up there and say it to the persons there that you're interested in a job in the Challenge 87 program, and if that job is available, they can refer it to you.
Meanwhile, the NPs accept the applications and give them to Canadian Employment Centre, the vet.
They do not. The way they process is they're evaluated by the bureaucrats in the region, and then they're given to the Member of Parliament, who has 10 days to give his opinion on the projects, whether he approves or disapproves. And he can also say to the people in the who the bureaucrats who receive the applications, what priorities he has. Is it youth? Is it elderly people, or different sectors of the economy?
Although this one is for students particularly.
For students,
Challenge.
but in terms of employers, he can say, well, I want to prioritize, for example, young people. And
If I'm a school dropout, can I still qualify for one of these minimum wage jobs?
you cannot qualify for the summer student program if you're a dropout. You would have to go through other programs that the federal government has available.
Now, there's one interesting one here. If I have an idea, can I get any money from you as a student to start my own business?
Yes, you can. You can obtain a loan to up to $3,000 to be able to start your own business during the summertime, and we do that in cooperation with the FBDB. In helping you secure a loan and start your own business and then reimburse it after the summer's over.
This student unemployment must be the biggest single problem. You know, the rash of teenage suicides we see in the States, and we unfortunately see some of it here too. That's got to be the biggest problem.
The biggest problem we have is a transition from school to work for young Canadians generally.
All right, we've got a 35 to 40% dropout who don't reach the end of high school.
True.
What are their chances of jobs?
Very slim. Their chances to obtain jobs in the labor market of the 1990s will be very slim, because there are less and less jobs for young people who do not have basic high school education. And if they fail to obtain that education, notwithstanding how the economy will perform, it will be very difficult for them to go out there and get a job. That's the big difference between the economy of the 1950s and 1987. In the 1950s, in a lot of cases, people could drop out of school before
Pick up a job at $10 an hour in a pulp mill.
Right, in the pulp mill, in the mining industry, buy a house, pay a mortgage, pay their union dues, retire, and that's it. That is going to become less and less true. And if a young person does not obtain a high school education, not only is it going to be a great loss to the country, but to them personally.
But you're a government that believes in free enterprise and the engines of small business, so therefore you're not going to do very much for these high school dropouts, are you?
Well, we are going to do a lot. We are doing a lot now. We spend approximately we'll be spending $720 million in fiscal year 86-87 on employment programs alone for young people. What we especially have to do, and what we are going to do in the very near future, is enter into discussions with the provinces on how we can deal with that school-to-work transition.
Just a minute. The discussions with the provinces.
Yeah.
Are you talking about dropouts or students straight to work? Don't understand you.
We're talking about students from the school-to-work transition, and that includes the dropouts, those who choose to leave school earlier, and to help them do that transition from leaving that school environment before the degree, because that choice is made individually, to the working environment. How can we better prepare young people to enter that labor market and better serve Canada, taking into account the fact that Canada is one of the countries in the world that depends the most on exports. Now, if we depend so largely on exports, we have to have a labor force that's going to perform, otherwise we're in big trouble.
Well, do I see a gem of a federal idea here whereby if I'm dropping out of school or when I leave high school, I am subsidized or directed to a job?
Well, at least some training, and you could see a germ of that idea depending on how much the provinces are ready to cooperate with us and how we can work with them. Because education, all the way up to the high school level, is unequivocally a provincial jurisdiction.
I have here a lavishly prepared book in both languages.
Yeah.
Get it for what it means, the right way up, if you will forgive me. What does it tell me? It tells me I can get cheap rail fares.
Yeah.
It tells me about health insurance programs. Tells me about athletic assistance programs. Tells me about family allowances. Is this for youth too?
It is for youth. It's a publication that we put together for the first time. You have in this booklet over 100 programs of the federal government or that's sponsored by the federal government that apply themselves to young people of all nature, whether it's a break-free smoking program, Department of Defense program, employment program, studying program.
Oh, yeah. So you hiring anybody for the DND this year?
There is a D&D program. One of them has just terminated that is in the book, but there will be
Is this a kind of summer soldier? You had
Yes,
one.
yes,
Liberals
we have.
had one.
Yes.
You've got summer soldiers
Yeah.
as separate from the Challenge 87.
Separate from the Challenge 87, we have a YTEP program, Youth Training and Employment, for 17 to 25 years olds. And we also have a civilian temporary employment program.
But any adult can apply for that one.
Any adult for the first one, for the second one, it's 17 to 25 years old.
There are some restrictions as well. You're giving these, you got to give these away free.
We're giving them. They're away free. They're available at Canadian employment centres. And as you see, they're very flashy, and they're meant to be that way. They're visually attractive to ensure ourselves that young people of secondary level will pick them up, read them, and look through them and know that there are federal government programs available and to make sure that these programs
Well,
are
I've put up
accessible.
your number for youth employment, 666-3707. That'll ring off the hook for days. Questions to Jean Charest, Minister of Youth, after the break. Now, identify yourself, sir.
My name's Hal Gray. I'm Executive Director of Little Mountain Neighborhood House. And I'm representing Save Our Summer, which is a national coalition of nonprofit agencies.
And you have problems with the program?
Yes, we do.
Here's the minister. Go ahead.
Okay, I have about 50 questions, but I'll limit myself to
Two.
Mr. Minister, since the nonprofit sector has been evaluated by your own by Employment and Immigration as achieving all the Challenge 87 goals in regard to creating new jobs, training criteria, and future job relatedness, while at the same time delivering needed services for children and seniors and many other groups, why has the nonprofit sector been asked to bear the total funding cuts to this program over the last 3 years?
Well, what we have done is introduce the private sector as a partner in the Challenge 87 program because we were seeking to offer career-related and work experience also in a broader range. And one of the things we've accomplished in doing that, for example, and you have to remember this, Mr. Gray, and I think that's what we failed to acknowledge, is that this program is designed not for the private sector or the nonprofit sector first. It is designed for students. And the evaluation we had last summer of Challenge 86 demonstrated to us, for example, that summer jobs for students in the private sector paid on average $1,000 more to the students in their pocket. Now, bear in mind that the reason we do this to start off with is to give them money so that they can go back to school. That all being said, the balance we had last summer was 2/3 of the money went to the nonprofit sector, 1/3 to the private sector. We're comfortable with that balance. I've said that this year. Our object is not to deprive you of funding. Our first and most important objective, not the sole one, but the first and most important, is to offer opportunities for young students to be able to get money and go back to school, and if we can, also good working experience. And that's what we're trying to do. We offered to Save Our Summer, by the way, an opportunity to do an evaluation of the needs of summer camps, but your leader, Mr. Roger Hollander, turned us down on that offer, and we're very sorry to hear that, but they weren't ready to sit down with us and discuss that.
Okay.
Oh, well, I just want to make one point, that the nonprofit sector is not getting 2/3 of the monies available because the public sector is involved in those monies, and the public sector has not received one dime of cuts over the last 2 years. All the money that has gone to the private sector has come directly from the monies that have been traditionally allocated to the nonprofit sector. And the reality of the situation is that, yes, this program is set up for hiring students, but there has traditionally, over the last 2 decades, been services for children and seniors that are real services that need to be fulfilled. And
Okay, let's see it. Do you accept that as a criticism?
Well, yes. What we know is that it plays a very important role, and we accept that, Mr. Gray. But we also have to accept the fact that, for example, the funding in 1983, when the unemployment rate for returning students in Canada was 17.9%. The Liberal government funded the summer student employment to the tune of $170 million. We, in 1987, when the unemployment rate for students is 13.3% for 1986, are going to continue to fund it at the level of $180 million.
What happened to the $30 million that went to Census Canada last year?
Well, that was the same $30 million that your group and that the NDP and the Canadian Federation of Students denounced as not being a summer student program. And because it's not there this year, the same people are saying, well, it's summer student job money that's not there. You can't have it both ways.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gray had a good crack at the whip. Go ahead, please.
Hello, I just came off a program through Manpower where my boss hired me, and Manpower paid 60% for classroom, 40% for practical. And it was very successful in the small business. I got a full-time job out of it, and I'd like to see it continue, but I don't think it's any good for large corporations. Is it happening now? Is it going to happen in the future? And can you do some ad work on it, because it worked really well?
Well, thank you. Most of our programs do work very well. What we're attempting to do, and we have to accept that there's going to be a process of change. Bringing in, when we brought in the Canadian Job Strategy in 1984, following consultations with the provinces, consultations with the unions and the private sector and all those involved, we essentially turned around all the employment programs in Canada to do 3 things. First of all, put all the emphasis on training and retraining. Second of all, bring in more partners, more people, including the private sector, not because the progressive conservative government is sold on the private sector, because that's where most of the jobs are.
And the better money.
And better money for students for summer student program. The third thing we did was put the emphasis on the long-term unemployed, because they're the ones that we have to put most energies on and most resources, because they're the ones who need the most help. So we are going to continue, we hope, to do those type of programs that you just referred to, sir, and offer those opportunities, but we have to accept the process of change and not do like the opposition did in the House of Commons, have a dinosaur attitude and cling to the past.
Go ahead, please.
Mr. Minister, you made a statement that the Student Venture Loan Program would give $3,000 to students. This is for 2 students. It's only $2,000 for 1 student.
A partnership, 3,000.
Yeah,
yes.
It's been raised. Partnership 3,000. It's been raised. First of all, there's a caveat here in the sense that where there is joint program between the province, as in our cases in BC and the government of Canada, that will vary from province to province. In certain provinces where there is already a student loan program, the federal government will not intervene, not to double services for nothing.
This is a joint effort, is it not?
This is a joint effort, so that's why there's a difference. But generally in Canada, sir, and I'm sorry to not have been more precise, that what we have as a general rule is a maximum $3,000. It was $2,000 last summer for a single student. It may be different, as you point out, for British Columbia.
Partnership. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I realize that it's a big job training students, or young people, anybody for that matter, and the resources are limited. What I can't understand is, why does your government continue to train people for non-existent jobs? And what I'm specifically referring to are vocational training in a number of the building trades areas, where many of the building trades unions in this province are experiencing 70 to 80% unemployment, and yet I can go down to a Manpower office and they'll pick up the freight, they'll pay me money to go and spend 4 or 5 months there going through a pre-apprenticeship school program, simply to come out of the other end with not a snowball's chance for a job. And yet if I want to go and take training for an area such as, say, marketing training at BCIT that has a very good employment record, there's no money available because it's not in the designated trades category.
Okay.
I mean, this just makes absolutely no sense. Don't you people monitor these programs? How can you continue to train people in an area where there's 80% unemployment already?
Well, it is the exceptional case that you point to. I don't know what the precise case that you're pointing to, and I take for granted that that's what's happening. One thing we have to understand right away, it is happening now that we're training people for jobs that eventually, because the economy's turned around so rapidly, or because for other reasons, once they graduate, there are no jobs in that area. That's the exceptional case. But we are doing very much a concerted effort to try to train people, of course, for jobs that are going to exist.
Thanks for your
once
call.
they're out there.
Go ahead, please.
Yes. Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm calling in regards to the baking apprenticeship program that's being done right now. I find that there's a reverse form of discrimination going on right now, where ladies and people with physical handicaps are being given preference over top of healthy young males.
But just a minute, you're talking about what kind of program?
The baking apprenticeship program.
Bakery apprenticeship program. Is that provincial?
Is that provincial?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm sorry, I don't know the program.
Maybe a
precisely.
Canada Manpower scheme.
Possibly.
Okay, because I find that that you're in effect with this, it's become virtually impossible to get hold of young apprentices.
Okay. Well, I can deal with one thing that you mentioned, the fact that there was a quotas in certain cases, for example, for young women, disabled people, native people, and visible minorities. That's something that we as a government introduced into our legislation in 1985 with set goals for these groups of people. We found, for example, in our experiences that by introducing the private sector in as a partner, we don't perform as well, because the private sector will not go out there as much as the nonprofit sector will and employ these people. The nonprofit sector will do an extra effort for these specific target groups. But it's something that we feel as a government compelled to do, because these groups need an extra push to get into the labor market. And if we don't do it as a government, if we don't intend to implement that, I'm not sure who will be able to do that. I think we have a leadership role to play, and we're ready to play it.
One last call. Go ahead, please.
Hello. I'm just wondering, first of all, I don't think the Conservative government is really serious about changing the employment situation, but I'm wondering why anybody on UIC or welfare should not be able to take whatever training or education they want when they're on that. You say that education is a provincial field, but in fact you make it a federal one when you make people fill out the UIC form and say whether or not they're taking any training or...
Well, now again, you're not in your portfolio, but I'm sure you get the point.
Oh, yes, I get the point very much so. And what we have to look for is more flexibility in the system, sir, and you're very right about that. That is our single most important problem. It's not necessarily injecting $10 or $20 million more into the programs, because that's not going to change the fundamental program. We have to seek to try to find to do things differently and change the system, and that's going to be our single most important challenge. You feel that this government is not serious about it. Well, I'll have to not agree with you. Of course, in British Columbia, we acknowledge and we're very sensitive to the fact that you have particular problems here. But we have to also, as a government, you have to understand why we're doing, for example, trade negotiations with the Americans. That's specifically because of regions like British Columbia.
I don't think the negotiations with the United States are going to benefit Canada at all. And free trade is a misnomer when you've got all this protectionism from the U.S.
Oh, fair enough, but that's a different debate altogether.
Well, I'll have to disagree with you, Mr. Webster. Trade, especially for British Columbia, is about jobs. And Canada is a trading nation. We are the second country in the industrialized world to depend so heavily on exports. And if we do not have access to markets, we're not going to have jobs. It's as simple as that.
And we must be prepared to accept the consequences of readjustment regardless of what, even in the auto industry in Ontario.
There will have to be, as there was for every other trade agreement in the world, there is always a phase-in period from 5 to 10 to 12 years. But we have to take globally, we have to work together in taking a global approach. If you only deal with the employment side but don't deal with the trade side, you're not being frank, and you're not putting out the full effort you should as a government.
Can't say that for you this afternoon. My thanks to Jean Charest, Minister of State for Youth in the Tory government in Ottawa. I'll be back after the break. Dale Alexander has sold 1.3 million copies of a book called Arthritis and Common Sense, and the cure-all for everything, from your arthritis to your sex life or your batting average as an athlete, comes from good old-fashioned cod liver oil.
Except for one mistake,
What's
Mr.
that?
Webster. There are no cures for arthritis, never will be. Cod liver oil can lubricate, but can't cure. There's no cure ever for cancer. There'll never be a cure for strokes or diabetes. Let's settle that at this point.
Well, there might well be a cure for diabetes.
Oh,
Is it on
never,
medical development?
never. No, under no circumstance.
Oh, yeah. Now, first of all, we must establish that you are not a professional medical man.
No, I only teach doctors what they did not learn in school.
You are a common sense nutritionist.
Right. They now call me a liquidist in London.
A which?
A liquidist. No one has ever
What's a
taught
liquidist?
to teach people how to drink a glass of water. You cannot be healthy if you drink water with your meal, Mr. Webster.
It says here from your book, anyone using ice cubes over a period of years is losing 25% of his lifespan.
That's right. Plus, they gain cold hands and cold feet, the cold tush and the cold nose. Now, when you got a cold nose, Mr. Webster, a cold tush, and a cold foot and a cold hand, rigor mortis is trying to enter your life.
I don't have a cold nose or a cold tush or a cold foot or cold hands. And it's 40 years since I took cod liver oil. As a matter of fact, we used to have to take it once a week or every day, I can't remember. My father always said, just put the cod liver oil in the spoon, sprinkle it with salt, and it'll taste like fish and chips. Now, you didn't know that.
What age did you stop taking cod liver oil, sir?
Oh, probably about 14 when I ran away from home.
You've been 50 years without cod liver oil. Why didn't you continue once a week?
Now, what I love about you, and I like people who are a little bit off the wall.
I am
I'm
off
not
the wall.
knocking you.
I know.
First of all, let me put it to you very bluntly. Cod
for the
liver
bod.
oil.
Cod for the bod.
Cod liver oil
Yes.
does not control obesity, does it?
It has nothing to do with obesity, sir. This
Why
is the
are you so heavy?
I'm the most expensive waistline in the world. This is made with $9 a pound macadamia nuts. It has nothing to do with cod liver.
You're a freak for macadamia
I'm
nuts.
a total freak for macadamia. I can give you a pound any time at night.
You're a cherubic sexagenarian
Well,
who softened Barbara Cartland's skin
I know Barbara quite well.
and raised Yoga Berry's batting average. Now, where and when did you soften Barbara's skin?
In England, she wrote a book on staying younger and looking longer. I visit her, and she sends me back to the train station in her white Rolls Royce. Have you ever had that honor, sir?
No.
I have.
You have counseled Carol Burnett,
Absolutely.
Joan Fontaine.
When she did Tea House of the August Moon, I got her shoulders to go without pain.
Now, but down to the arthritis. Do clinical tests done by medical researchers support your thesis
Yes.
that the daily application of cod liver oil lubricates your joints?
Okay, you ready for this?
Yes.
Start with Lancet.
Who? Lancet.
Lancet magazine.
The Lancet,
Out
yes.
of England. It was done at the Albany Medical School under Dr. Joel Cream with 9 doctors, double-blind study. Talk about the New England Journal of Medicine. I'm talking about prestigious medical journals who have said Dale Alexander's worth hearing. Cod liver oil is a lubricator. But if you take it your way, from the spoon with salt, it goes into the liver and you don't get the true evaluation of the lubrication. You don't have to wear eyeglasses, Mr. Webster. I don't. My wife will be 80 years old in 2 years. Neither one of us wear eyeglasses.
And you can prescribe the cod liver oil to improve one's eyesight.
Well, there's vitamin A in there, sir. And you
Vitamin A.
Yes.
And D.
And E.
And E.
You take it and shake it up with 2 tablespoons of milk. You can oil your eyes. You can put the moisture back in skin. You don't have to wrinkle when you're 120. Look what Reagan had to do. I ran for governor against Reagan in 1966. Did you know
Governor
that?
of California.
That's right. And I came in third in the 7-man Democratic race. So my slogan was ABC, Alexander Best for California. Sure, Reagan beat the pants out of me, but let me tell you something. Reagan now wears 2 hearing aids, 2 contact lenses, had 2 cancer operations on his nose. His wife Nancy has cancer of the lip. Reagan has had prostate cancer and bowel cancer. How much more can you do to destroy a president?
Well, you're saying if he'd taken cod liver oil, none of these things would have happened to him.
Absolutely.
And you told him that during the 1966
Well, I
campaign,
tried to
no
get the
doubt.
message across.
Is it true, this is really quite interesting, and I know it's true, that they're thinking of erecting a Dale Alexander statue in Reykjavik, Iceland?
I just came from Reykjavik. I spent 36 hours there with my wife. They call her the Cod Mother. I'm the Cod Father. And they told us that we're saving the industry called the fishing industry, which is 80% of the industry of Iceland. I am Mr. Iceland, if you want to call me that.
And do they have enough cod around?
No, there will be a worldwide shortage. By September 1st, you can't find cod liver oil in the United States.
Why is that?
The seals are eating the cod because you can't shoot the seal on the sea lions now. Right now, Mr. Webster, there's 1 million ton shortage, a shortage of cod liver oil, which comes in 3 flavors, icky, yucky, and lousy.
Halibut oil just as good.
It doesn't have the vitamin E. It doesn't have quality. Cod liver oil, Mr. Webster, has 10 parts of vitamin A to 4 parts of vitamin D. It's the perfect human machine oil. When's the last time you checked your oil line, Mr. Webster?
I don't know. I don't have a dipstick to check my oil.
Well, I have a dipstick if you want to use it. What color do you want to check it with?
What do you mean?
You can put that in your ear and check your earwax very quickly.
No, I refuse to do that.
Well, I've done it all my life.
What does that tell you?
It tells you whether your oil line is dirty, needs a replacement. If you have no earwax, you're going to go deaf just like the President of the United States.
You must have earwax.
Earwax is your lifeline. Do you put a dipstick in your car in the oil pump, Mr. Webster? Well, why do you do that?
To check the oil level.
Well, this is the human machine oil level. It has to be done at the earwax.
My ear is my dipstick for my oil level.
That's right. It tells you whether your diet is margarine or butter or whether it's cakey or
But I
streaked.
thought it was bad to have wax in your ears.
Sir, you missed the whole point. Earwax is important, but it has to be the right color. It should be soft, yellow, and pasty. If your earwax, well, heavens, do you realize how important we've missed this whole project of the human machine by putting a dipstick in our ear once a week?
Now, I can agree with this, of course. Raw foods keep you young. That
Absolutely.
you must have.
Microwave ovens destroy your food value.
Microwave.
Microwave cooking is, you just electrocute your food.
Just kills a lot.
If you're going to eat food, you might as well eat raw food.
Throw it out, eh?
Absolutely. $900 for a microwave to melt butter, sir? Would you spend $900 for a microwave oven just to melt your butter?
No, no, no.
It's only good it has.
All right, to get down to the serious thing recognized by the Lancet. What is the correct diet and the correct dosage of cod liver oil to lubricate painfully arthritic joints?
Now listen to this carefully, because this is the most important part of this conversation. There is a line in life. You can find the right line or the wrong line. This is the line of youth, how to slow the aging process, the fountain of youth. On the other side of that ledger is the fountain of old age. If you drink oil-bearing liquids, there's only 3 worth drinking with your meal: milk, soup, and carrot juice. That keeps you young. But if you drink from the other side of the ledger, which ages the body, water with meals ages the body, coffee and tea ages the body, beer, whiskey, and wine ages the body, frozen juices age the body, plus allergy, and soft drinks will destroy the body before it's had its chance to come alive. I think every child, if Brian Mulrooney is listening to this program, and probably not, if you send this tape to Brian and say, for heaven's sakes, Brian, why don't you become world famous? Stop talking about acid rain. You said it. Talk about acid beverages and how it destroys the human body.
Milk, soup, and carrot juice.
That's right.
With your meals. Your questions to Dale Alexander, the Cod Father, after the break. Where am I going? Go ahead to Dale Alexander.
Yes, Mr. Alexander. My question is that, am I on?
Yes, but you must turn down your television set.
Oh, it's turned down?
Well, ask the question.
Okay. My question is that I have fibrositis, and I've never been able to get any response from any doctor.
Okay, just a minute.
Very simple. What are you drinking called tea? Do you drink any tea? Do you drink tea?
Yes, I do.
You can never get overcome fibrositis. Tannic acid dries out the insulation of the fibers. So what do you drink with your lunch and dinner?
Tea.
Then you can't get well. The fanciest word now in Canada and England is polymyalgia rheumatica. Do you know what it means, Mr.
No,
Webster?
polymyalgia rheumatica, no.
Well, that's, if you've got polymyalgia rheumatica, you get $300 to give the doctor in the United States. Poly meaning many, myositis meaning muscles, and rheumatica rheumatism. When you have dry muscles and dry joints, you have a simple thing called polymyalgia rheumatica.
So she should take cod liver oil.
If she doesn't, if she takes cod liver oil and doesn't give up her tea, she'll never, even the cod liver oil won't work.
Gives up the tea. Go ahead from Nelson, BC.
Mr. Alexander, I just wanted to tell you that my wife and I have read your book years ago, and we've been following your advice for years and taking the cod liver oil regularly. It does wonders for you, but also it is good for sleeping. It's like a sleeping pill.
Oh, great. You know, Mr. Webster is probably the best interview I've done in over 8,800 shows all over the world. I've done all the BBC broadcasts. This man knows how to investigate a person's background, but he doesn't know how the value of keeping up on his cod liver oil. You've got to learn that tonight, Mr. Webster.
I may well know it, but I may have deliberately taken the provocative attitude.
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Webster.
Yes.
This is Big Julie calling.
Hello, Big Julie.
How are you?
I hear you had a baby.
I had a baby, and I want to swear by cod liver oil.
Great. Swear by cod liver oil.
Tell you, my mom weaned all 3 of us kids on it, and we're the only 3 kids I know that stand in line still to have our teaspoon of cod liver oil every morning.
You know, Mr. Webster, I was in Reykjavik, Iceland, with my wife last week. Any woman in Reykjavik, you know, that's the home of the fishing situation, who takes cod liver oil during the pregnancy, and uses 10 drops of cod liver oil in the first 3 years, switches to a teaspoon from 3 to 5 and a tablespoon. They don't have cavities all their life, except they have turned to alcoholism. They use that to keep warm in Reykjavik.
Well, Big Julie wouldn't do that. Big Julie, how big's the baby?
He was born 9/14.
With or without hair?
Oh, he's got a whole bloody head of it.
Well, you know, most of the children in the United States are born bald-headed. I'm the world's expert on hair loss. I know how to lose hair. I do not know how to grow hair.
Big Julie, thanks for the call.
I'll talk to you soon.
Bye. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Alexander and Mr. Webster. Can you possibly tell me, does your cod liver oil pills help for chronic colitis and Crohn's disease?
No, no, no. When you take a capsule of cod liver oil, it's surrounded by a gelatin surface. Once the digestive juices break down that gelatin, the little bit of cod liver oil in that capsule goes in the liver, and it doesn't act as a lubricant. If you're dealing with serious problems like Crohn's disease, you know what I would do to you?
What?
I'd take your blouse off, hold my arm stiff, and see if you have the green elbow. The green elbow is the heart of the problem.
It's my daughter that has it.
Well, that's right. Does your daughter drink any soft drink?
Very little.
Well, look at her elbows. If she's got a green elbow or a gray and scaly elbow, and what was the other problem you mentioned?
Chronic colitis or Crohn's.
I took a man under Dr. Alsdaven in California about 10 years ago. I'll never forget it. He came in on a stretcher, 95 pounds, with bleeding ulcerative colitis. Cod liver oil is a miracle worker, but if you don't stop drinking acid beverages, the saliva is in one's mouth, Mr. Webster, to neutralize acid. If you drink acid like lemonade, iced tea, the wrong kind of tea, soft drink, the skin goes dry, the eyesight goes, and the hearing system. You can't drink ice fluids while you eat of acid beverages.
Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead, please. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, there you are.
Mr. Alexander.
Yes.
In living color.
What I would like to ask is, first of all, I want to mention that I've taken cod liver oil, and it's taken all the aches out of my joints.
Do you hear that, Mr. Webster? I've got 1 million Canadians getting well, and they're not on the dole system because of that. I'm an expensive person to come to Canada.
But the question I have is halibut oil just as good as cod liver oil?
No, absolutely not. Cod liver oil has a 10-to-4 ratio of vitamin A to D. It has the essential fatty acids plus EPA plus DHA, and the world cardiologists are now saying cod liver oil will prevent you getting a heart attack, but it's not the platelets aggregate. Sir, cod liver oil is the world's best and only cod for the bod.
Thank you. Go ahead from Mackenzie, BC.
Yes, well, my doctor's got me on cod liver oil for arthritis in my shoulder. I was just wondering, would it help to put it on externally, to rub it in like a lotion?
Oh, good heavens. The only people that put it on externally live in Nigeria. They put it on the scalp when the kids are born to close the fontanelles. It has nothing to do with inside the body. You must take it like a man, inside out.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Oh, hi, Mr. Alexander. How about your cod liver oil? Would that help out with kidney stones?
No, that's a different thing. If you're drinking a lot of frozen orange juice or grapefruit juice or grape juice, the kidney stones begin to happen. You're not supposed to drink acid beverages if you have kidney stones.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Mr. Alexander. I just have to kind of argue with you. I have a very large vitamin chart, and it's taken from the Nutrition Almanac, and it says vitamin A, and it is for kidney and gallstones, it says here, plus asthma, acne, etc. And fish liver oil is the main, where it's found, and it's also found like vitamin D in fish oils. And I wanted to ask you how much you should take. And
let me tell you about the Vikings. The Vikings, 400 years ago, had a bucket, a basin of cod liver oil inside their front door with a dipper. And when you went to the Viking home, you took a whole dipper of cod liver oil. When you left to show your respect, you took another dipper. Vikings have proved once and for all that cod liver oil makes you sturdy and healthy. Good heavens, what you're telling me is you don't know what liquid's about. Do you drink water?
Yes, I do.
How many glasses a day?
I drink too much according to one doctor and not enough according to another.
Do you drink it with a meal, before or after the meal?
No, I don't drink it with a meal.
Do you drink it just after?
Well, in between.
Then if you take vitamins too?
I just take one a day with iron, and I take brewer's yeast and desiccated liver.
When you take vitamins water, all you're doing is making expensive urine.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Alexander.
Yep.
Can you get the same benefits from taking the cod liver oil capsules as to the liquid?
Absolutely not. You could spend a year, 2 years on capsules. You can take it on vacation in lieu of cod liver oil. But capsules do not produce skin moisture. It's locked up in the liver. Capsules don't oil your eyes or make earwax, do not help your sex drive, don't harden your teeth. Capsules can be used, but they don't 1/50th of what cod liver oil itself if you mix it.
Thank you. Last short call from 100 Mile House. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was wondering, I've tried cod liver oil a couple of times and was disappointed because it seems to flare up gallbladder.
Well, then you should have a book in your hand, get it in a health food store called Back to Eden. You can get rid of your gallstones in 1 day if you follow that book, Back to Eden by Jethro Kloss, K-L-O-S-S.
So the cod liver oil shouldn't...
After you take the flush for 2 or 3 days, you get rid of the gallstone, you can proceed with the cod liver oil.
Oh,
but if you don't take an oil, you're going to get wrinkled early in life, your eyes are going to blur, your ears are going to ring. You've got to get understand that book.
Don't forget that. Take your cod liver oil or else. My grateful thanks to a very bright man, Dale Alexander, author of Arthritis and Common Sense. Much
Number
obliged,
2.
Dale.
Arthritis and Common Sense, number 2.
Oh, number 2.
Number 1 is now out of
After
print.
the break. In the past 20 years or so, thousands of Canadian businessmen and businesswomen, when they retired, took up a new career with an organization called Canadian Executive Service Organization, CESO. And there's a touch of glamour to it. You can go work in Peru or South America or wherever anybody needs help. In the past 20 years or so, thousands of Canadian businessmen and businesswomen, when they retired, took up a new career with an organization called Canadian Executive Service Organization, CESO. And there's a touch of glamour to it. You can go work in Peru or South America or wherever anybody needs help. And today I've got Robert Dale, who's chairman of the board, former distinguished Canadian businessman, and I've got Peter Rogers, who is a volunteer who used to be the general manager of dear old Wellwood, Canada. Is that right?
No, manager of production services, Jack. A little different.
Production services. Now, we'll come to you, Bob Dale. I haven't heard much about CESO recently. What do you do nowadays, and are you still looking for retired people with experience and knowledge to send them to do projects in and outside of Canada?
Yes, Jack, we're always looking for people, and we have about 1,600 names on our list now, but we're always looking for people with new skills and new abilities.
Now, where do they work?
They work...
Of your 1,600 people now, how many overseas and how many in Canada?
Well, in a year, we run about 2,000 projects, 500 of which would be overseas, and about 1,500 in the north of the Indian bands.
Your Canadian work is more or less with Indian bands, helping them on specific projects.
That's right.
Now, what kind of businessman or businesswoman are you looking for? You're looking for a guy who's good with his hands, or are you looking for a guy who's good with the head?
Well, both. We're looking for all those types of skills. For example, we've sent a baker, for example, up to a band to help a fellow set up a bakery, and the sort of person you want is a fellow who can give him hands-on training and assistance, work right with him.
Now, do you have any trouble in getting volunteers to work for you, or are you on a recruiting drive right now?
Well, we're always looking for people. But we do have about 1,600 on our list now. But, you know, there are more and more demands for new skills, computers, systems, all that sort of thing. So new people are always welcome.
Now, let's turn to Peter Rogers. Peter, what whetted your interest in CESO, and what have you done for and with them?
I heard about CESO before I came with the organization. A friend of mine was on a number of projects. I was interested and applied for it. And I've been on the 2 offshore projects. When the island of Dominica was a forest industry, small forest industry complex, logging, sawmilling, prefab housing industry. And the Peruvian assignment was in the plywood sector, a private company who operated 3 plants in Peru and wished to improve their productivity. So it's I've been on quite a number of local projects.
You go down to, was it Peru you said, where you're in the plywood operation?
Yes.
Showed them how to improve their techniques and increase their output.
That's correct.
And the other one you did in Dominique. Where's Dominique? In the Caribbean?
Island Dominique in the Caribbean, between Martinique and Guadeloupe, small island.
When you walk in as a CESO volunteer, you don't get paid as such, do you?
No, there's no salary.
You just get...
You get your expenses, but no salary.
Get your living expenses.
Correct.
How are you received? Has the name CESO preceded you over there? And they say, well, here's another good Canadian guy who's going to really help us out.
Well, the reception is very good. People need help, and they appreciate your help, and they accept they certainly want your expertise, your technical expertise. And the reception is very good as far as I'm concerned.
In fact, CESO has never been involved in scandals or troubles. I mean, that's a bit of a record for any agency in any government in any Canadian format these days.
Well, I think if you look at it, Jack, they're probably the best possible ambassador you could send overseas because, number one, he's a volunteer. He's not being paid. He's in there to help a company or individual. People know that, and they respect what they're doing.
Now, when you apply as a CESO volunteer, do you sign a contract with the outfit and you must carry out your assignment?
No, there's no contract. We have what is called overseas representatives in the various countries. He would seek out this project, for example. A fellow wants help. He sends back to our operations center in Toronto what the problem is, what type of help is needed. We try and find the volunteer who best suits the requirement, and off he goes. There are no contracts or anything else. He goes for the period of time, I guess you'd agree, that is necessary to do the job.
How long would you be down in Dominique, for instance?
Short term, Dominica was 5 weeks. Peru was 6 weeks. Usually the client asks, in this case, I'm going to another project next month in Jamaica. The client's asking for 2 months. I think it'll probably take 1 month. They're short-term projects.
Short-term projects. You just go and look at the equipment and say, set this up this way, or buy this little piece, or do it this way, and you'll increase your output.
We can make recommendations, some of which can be carried out while we're there, most of which probably take place when we leave.
But I see you operate in countries all around the world, from Bolivia to Colombia to Costa Rica to China.
Yes.
Can a CESO volunteer nominate a country he wants to go to?
No.
I mean, he can't use it as a cheap tour, can he?
No.
Eh?
No, they respond to the request, and we look for the best person to do that.
All right, there's a retired chap with skills and his wife is free to travel. Can she go with him?
Yes, for any project over 3 weeks. The wife or husband, as the case may be, accompanies the volunteer.
Are you looking for volunteers now?
Always looking for volunteers.
What is there an age, a minimum age that I'm not going to ask you your age, Peter. You're obviously only in your early 40s, but
thanks very much.
There is a minimum. You want people who are retired.
Yeah, or approaching retirement. I think the average age probably runs from, say, about 58 up to 75.
Probably, yeah.
And you don't have many women in it yet, do you?
Well, we have quite a few, and as well, as you mentioned, Jack, the spouse accompanies the husband, we'll say in this particular case, and while she's there, she works on other projects, whether it's teaching English.
We have a number, I think, where you wouldn't mind if people phone to make inquiries about service with CESO, would you? 475 West Georgia, 698-7401. One last question. You can't quibble about CESO. It's obviously a good organization. What does it cost the Canadian taxpayer in terms of a budget to run your organization?
Well, the help we get from CETA for our overseas program budget runs somewhere around $3 million, and from the Department of Indian and Northern Affairs we get around, I think it's $1.5 million.
But the Indian connection is really a major thrust.
Well, yes and no. We do more projects there because they're shorter. We're closer to them. We don't have to travel long distances as to China.
Well, my thanks to Peter Rogers, a volunteer who's off again. Where are you going next?
On Sunday, to Jamaica.
To Jamaica as a CESO volunteer, and to Bob Dale, the chairman of the board of the Canadian Executive Service overseas. And it seems to be an organization that's cheap at the price. I'll be back after the break.
It is time as a party, it is time as a people across the nation, we said
yes to Quebec and yes to Canada at the same time.
That's the right number for CESO is 689-7401. Sorry about that. Tomorrow, Ed Broadbent, Brian Calder on the purchase property tax, and the physiotherapists who are upset about the $5 fee at 5 p.m. precisely.